I thought Persona 3 Reload was a worthwhile remake. I know fans are divided on the specifics, but that's not really what I mean. I don't care if the final boss arena is green now. I care if people have access to a fully featured version of Persona 3 on modern platforms, instead of the extremely compromised Persona 3 Portable being their only option. The best case scenario would definitely be a remaster of Persona 3 Fez, with the female protagonist and accompanying social links from Portable added into it, but the 2022 ports of 3, 4 and 5 were probably our one chance of getting that, and we didn't. So fine, do a full remake. I'd rather have that than us just be stuck with Portable, and I thought Reload was a solid remake. It still takes until the introduction of Aegis for the story to actually start going somewhere 35 hours in, but overall Persona 3 is really good. So after hearing my thoughts on P3R, you might be confused as to why the title of this video implies that my opinion on P4R is less positive, and that's because it is. So get ready to hear why.
How's that?
First of all, the thing I mentioned about the need for a fully featured version of Persona 3 on modern platforms, yeah, P4 does not have that same problem. The version of P4 on modern platforms is Persona 4 Golden, which is widely considered to be the best version of the game. Aside from the graphics, I think Golden is pretty much on the same level as Persona 5 in terms of scope, animation and the combat. And honestly, I think P4 is ahead of 5 in many ways, like the setting, themes, and especially the characters. In terms of the voice direction, unlike the original Persona 3, which I think had a lot of room for improvement, 4 Golden just nails it. Yukiko and Naoto sound kinda off sometimes, but for the most part, everyone sounds great.
Dude, hey, he ain't moving. Is he hibernating?
Hey. Don't tell me. It's not because he's been in our world too long, is it? Are you serious? Teddy!
Golden has 2 optional post-game dungeons, even more than P5R, which I did not expect in the slightest. Overall, I think Persona 4 holds up almost perfectly, and I really don't think it needs a remake as faithful as the one we seem to be getting, especially when it feels so early for a remake of P4, which might sound weird since when P4R comes out, it will have been longer between the original P4 and Revival than the time between the original Persona 3 and Reload, and it didn't feel early then, so what's up? Well, first of all, while each Persona game practically becomes its own series at this point, in the mainline grand scheme of things, P4 is technically still the second to last Persona game, isn't it? So a full remake of it feels odd to me. And secondly, well, Persona 4 wasn't just Persona 4, was it? P4 was the first one to get genuinely popular, and was subsequently the first one to get, for lack of a better word, milked. A ton of P4 spin-off projects and games released, with the game itself becoming the face of the series for 8 years from 2008 to 2016, which is only slightly less than the 10 years P5 has been the face of the series nowadays. And a P4 remake just feels even more unnecessary to me when Persona 1 and Persona 2 are practically archaic by comparison, completely inaccessible on modern hardware, and could gain infinitely more from the full remake treatment. I've done a lot of thinking about the idea of a Persona 4 remake since Revival was shown off back in June, and I've realised that Reload and Revival are probably directed far more at series newcomers than fans of the original, which I can understand Revival more from that aspect, but for this game itself and what it needs, I still can't really think of a good reason for us to be returning to Inaba anytime soon. But tough luck me, cause we are. Let's stop talking about the idea of a P4 remake and start talking about this P4 remake. I have the opinion that if a definitive version of your game isn't widely accessible on modern hardware, a more or less faithful remake is a good choice. But if your game is already available everywhere, take liberties. Don't be afraid to remove and add things if it makes for a better flowing game. Don't change too much, but give the remake a reason to exist, while not replacing the original in the process. This is my main problem with Persona 4 Revival. It seems to be the same game as the one you can get for $9 right now, but with better graphics and some modernizations which we'll talk about in a bit. But I think a lot more can be done. For example, what if we added 3 or 4 more POIs to this list? I want to make Inaba feel less like 2 straight lines in Junes, and more like a real town. Since Junes is such a big part of the game, what if it was changed to be fully explorable with stuff you could actually buy to customize your room, buy ingredients to make food to give you social links like the gifts in P5, and they could help your party members in battle some way? Remember how P5R had social events like darts and the jazz club and the gym? How about another POI with new activities in the same vein as those? The karaoke they're adding is a start, but I don't know what it's gonna be like since we've barely seen any of it. Now, as cool of an idea as it is, I don't think they should change the culprit. Adachi is just so iconic, I could never. But I do think more could be done with him. If Persona 3 Fez was available on modern platforms, I think Reload should have changed it so instead of just transferring to Gekukan, Ryoji moves into Iwatodai Dorm itself, eventually becoming cognizant of the Dark Hour and joining Cease as a playable party member, getting a lot more screen time and truly becoming a trusted friend to the whole team, making it even more emotional when he finds out his role as the Harbinger of Nyx, and tells the rest how killing him is one of their two options. With Adachi, I doubt he would join the investigation team or anything. On one hand, Adachi says himself that he killed Mayumi Yamano and Saki Konishi for the thrill of it, since he finds Inaba so boring, initiating interactions with the very people trying to pursue him, speculating with Dojima about the killer while being the killer himself. He just loves fucking with people because it's fun and makes life in Inaba more interesting for him. So I could see him literally joining the team looking for him, again to fuck with him, but I think being that involved with the others would be too risky for him. Instead, I can see a scenario where Adachi purposefully makes an appearance on TV in order to show up on the Midnight Channel himself. Around the time Nanako was resuscitated. When this happened, he'd go into the TV world bringing Namatame with him, to make it look like he escaped and kidnapped Adachi, the investigation team going into the TV world to save Adachi. Adachi's dungeon would start out reflecting the lousy detective persona that the group view him as, but at the end of that dungeon, the investigation team, or probably just Naoto, notice some sketchy elements of Adachi's dungeon and confront him about it. This is where he's revealed to be the true culprit, with him escaping and his dungeon doubling in length, with the aesthetic changing to the darker one from the original game. That's the type of thing I want out of this remake. In the original, the killer is revealed by bringing up the possibility to Yosuke and Naoto outside of a Chinese diner, and while that was fine, I think a far more dramatic way to do it like that would make for a cool plot point, even if it's not exactly what the original did. Alright, now that I've talked about Revival's lack of bigger changes, I do want to talk about the things it does add, mainly in terms of the game's presentation and the improved TV world exploration. Overall, the game looks really good. Revival is going for a far more dynamic style to the cutscenes, with camera angles changing far more often than previous games, and the faces on the actual character models being more expressive than before. I do really like this, but it feels kinda awkward with how it clashes with the character portraits. These go for a much more minimalistic style, with far less shading than what we saw in Reload. And I mostly like this. I think Kanji could have used a bit more shading on the face, and Rise's eyes are way too far apart. But overall, they look great. Naoto and Marie being my favorites. The problem is that in the TV world, the game is shiny like Reload was, but the portraits still look like this. Look at Shadow Chie's portrait here. It just looks out of place with the game if you ask me. While in the real world, there's a far more stylized look on everything than Reload had, which does make the portraits fit in a lot better with the rest of the game. Though another problem with the portraits is that I think they're a bit superfluous now. As I said just now, the cutscenes are a lot more dynamic in terms of the camera angles, and the models are far more expressive than ever before. And because of that, it kind of feels like the job of the portraits, conveying the character's emotions because the models aren't able to, well, it's not really a problem anymore. For an example, in the Trails in the Sky games, which I'll hopefully be covering pretty soon, there are character portraits all the time, whenever an important character is talking. But in the recent remakes, the character portraits are mostly removed, but they still show up sometimes when the character who's speaking isn't facing the camera. I feel like that's what they should have done here if they're gonna go down this more dynamic direction for the cutscenes. The way it is now, I find myself struggling with what I should be looking at while watching footage. If I just treat it like a show and stay here, then there's always something flickering in the corner of my field of vision. And there's obviously my muscle memory of looking at the portraits like in previous games. But if I do that, then I'm missing what's actually happening in the scene with the background changing, making me look up to the middle of the screen again. It just feels like the balance is off now. I'm just gonna hope I can get used to it when I get my hands on the game itself. On to the presentation and changes to TV world exploration and combat. Here's probably where I'm most optimistic on the game. The dungeon crawling in the original, I gotta admit, it was definitely the part of the original that held up the least. The main problems were 1. Like Tartarus before it, each floor was randomly generated, and 2. No run button, so it was pretty damn slow to get around and avoid shadows that were chasing you. In Revival, the floors are still randomly generated, each dungeon being themed around the hidden side of the palace's ruler would have made for really cool intricately designed puzzly dungeons like the palaces in P5, but we can run now, so that's cool. And there's even a legitimately brand new addition to the series with a guard mechanic. Awesome. Onto the combat, and obviously it looks amazing. It's modern Persona combat, it's flashy and incredibly intuitive. They've of course added the baton pass, one of my favourite elements of the modern Persona games, so that's a big deal. The new prime time thing is interesting. It looks absolutely broken, just getting the ability to have your turn go on far longer than normal, with all your moves costing nothing to do, and then getting a Theurgy style super move at the end on top of that. It looks crazy, but also pretty fun. I don't play these games for a real challenge, so I don't mind this being crazy powerful at all. On the topic of the combat, this is a good opportunity to talk about the redone music. Just like with Reload, all the music has been remade with a new vocalist and a new battle theme has been added too, and it sounds great. Definitely one of my favourite Persona battle themes. The new Reach Out to the Truth is the only one I have much of an opinion on, the others all sound great. The new vocalist, I like in most of the other songs, but I don't think her rapping voice is that good in this. Also, they changed some of my favourite lyrics in the song, which I was pretty disappointed by. And to be honest, I don't even really know why, though to make up for it, the solo after the chorus sounds absolutely amazing from the snippet of gameplay I saw. My jaw dropped when I first heard that. I cannot wait to hear the clean version of it without all the sound effects in the way. And just before we wrap this up, I thought I'd cover the more contentious changes to Revival I haven't mentioned yet. The new voice actors, I think they mostly sound good. As much as I love the original cast, I think bringing all the old voice actors back would make this whole thing feel even more pointless, so I don't mind hearing new takes on these characters at all. The only one I find really jarring is Teddy. He sounds so different. It's so weird. Unlike the others, I really can't see myself getting used to the new Teddy voice. I don't have much to say on the others, but I'm definitely looking forward to what Adachi sounds like. And lastly, I'll briefly go over the whole, those changes, mainly in regards to Yosuke. So Yosuke had some lines towards Kanji in the original that did feel kinda, homophobic-y, and it seems like they're changing them for Revival. Personally, I would like to see the lines be changed, but regardless of what I or any one person thinks about this element of the game, I mean, self-discovery is the main theme of Persona 4, and if this game ends up selling up to 3 million copies like Reload did, I bet at least a few 100,000 of those people will be gay people. So Atlus has the responsibility of either changing a few of a fictional video game character's lines, or potentially insulting a huge amount of their player base. Obviously, I 100% agree with the choice to change it. I mean, I love these characters, but they aren't real, and we shouldn't prioritize them or a few things they say over real people and their feelings. Though, that should really go without saying. Plus, the Persona 4 anime already changed the line, so it's not like this game is this holy grail that can't be tampered with at any cost. But regardless, I think I've made my thoughts on P4R clear. I think as a game itself, it looks pretty much perfect. If someone who's never played Persona 4 saw this after playing 5 Royal and 3 Reload, this would just be another awesome Persona game on the pile. But in the greater context, for me, as someone who's played the original an unhealthy amount, I don't think it's doing quite enough to justify its existence to me, when, in my opinion, a slightly lesser version is available on everything right now for dirt cheap. I hope nothing I've said in this video is misconstrued as me saying this is a worthless, soulless remake or anything like that. Those kinds of all caps videos titles devoid of any nuance, just wanting to get under my skin like crazy, I despise that kind of thing. Here's a way to put it: I would never remove Persona 4 Revival from existence if I had the chance, because even if there was just one person who was only into modern games and would never have played Golden, it's just too outdated for their taste. If they play Revival and get the same magical experience I and so many other people had with the original, and get to meet Chie and Kanji and Rise and Naoto and Marie and everyone else when they never would have otherwise, that's amazing, and Revival is worth existing for that reason alone. But personally, it's got me thinking about if they're willing to do such a faithful remake of P4, as ridiculous as it is to say, an eventual full remake of Persona fucking 5 isn't out of the question. I still don't see it happening, but maybe around a decade or so from now, when the modern Persona game standards are raised that much higher, when P6 adds a huge baton pass style addition to the combat that you can't imagine Persona games without anymore, I can see at least some kind of P5 overhaul happening, especially since it is a PS3 game at its core. Since, apparently, if there is even a morsel of room for improvement, a full remake is warranted. And again, I know the game's probably directed towards series newcomers more than anyone else, but I know it's a few years old, but I think Reload is still a great place to start for newcomers. For P4, I just personally don't see that much that appeals to me, as someone who prefers the life sim element of Persona, since I'm seeing very few big improvements on that end. But maybe I could try and change my mindset instead. I could try and view this less as a remake of Persona 4, and more as a way to spice up my next playthrough of the game, because I think I do want to try it out and see what I think. Just not at launch. I think I'll just look up my favourite moments online when it does come out. You know, the school campout, the Tatsumi Port Island school trip, the King's game, the fully voiced Marie social link, the true story performance, everyone's line deliveries during the Nanako death, and of course, Adachi walking forward with his arms out at the start of his boss fight, the look of the Hollow Forest, and myriad truths. I'll probably end up buying it a month or two later if I'm not playing anything else at the time and can find it for a decent price. I do want to make another video, or at least put a pinned comment on this video if my opinion changes when the game comes out. Who knows, that's all I have to say though. This is my first time writing a script in like a year, and it's my first time trying to critique something in a video ever, so this video probably came out pretty bad, but I hope you can still understand my point even if you disagree. Honestly though, I really don't mind not being over the moon with a rival or anything. Persona 6 is on the way now, so there's that to be excited about, and of course, Trails in the Sky second chapter is coming out this September, and my hype levels are through the roof. Now that's a game that could use a remake. And I've never actually played the original, so I'm unbelievably excited to see where the story goes after that insane cliffhanger the first chapter ended with. I don't want to just disappear for a year again, and plan on doing a far more positive video later this month on the new Trails in the Sky remake. So let's see if I actually end up making that one. Until then, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.